Welcome back to the Elle-Sera podcast. Today's guest is the wonderful Victoria Hardy, author and motivational menopause speaker with a key focus on menopause at all ages and stages of life. We spoke about a multitude of things, but in particular, we talked about surgical menopause, a subject that we both feel needs a little bit more light shed on it. Enjoy. Victoria, I am so thrilled to actually finally meet you. We have bonded over Instagram. And our love of the Liverpool City region. You have come on the train. How long was the trip today?
Oh, about 5.5 hours.
5.5 hours. That's
dedication.
Commitment. It's dedication. Thank you. And it's snowing, everybody. It's really snowing out there. So thank you so much. You've got a bit of a love affair with Liverpool, haven't you?
I do. It feels like my second home. And actually, I got quite emotional coming into the station today for the first time in many years, because 18 years ago this year, I had my daughter in this city.
And that was at the Liverpool Women's?
It was, yeah. 15 weeks early, never planned. My husband was playing in the cavern and I went into labour and we lived in the hospital for 7 weeks. Everyone in this city looked after us. And yeah, I did not expect that emotion today, so...
It's a very warm place. We get that a lot from if we've got podcast guests, especially if they've come from down south.
Yeah.
Yeah. Last week they were like, everyone's so friendly.
I know, we're so mean down
We
south.
pull our heads up when we talk to you. Yeah, it's mad. But welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
No, it's just lovely to have you here. So our paths crossed because your Instagram content just makes me smile. And you are the biggest advocate for menopause in younger women. You've now seen some of our marketing. We've obviously had conversations, and the reason that we started speaking with someone went quite hard on me, actually. They went quite hard on me because some of our content featured a younger lady in her early 30s talking about how Elle-Sera alleviates her symptoms of menopause. And the statements were things like, this girl can't be in menopause. She's too young. This is so unrelatable. You need to check out who's doing your marketing. This is ridiculous. Pretty biting comments. And I hope that you didn't mind this. I used you as a prime example that, there are women that are undergoing serious symptoms of menopause that are a lot younger than the, average age of that kind of over 40 bracket. And you're a shining beacon of that. So I want to talk about that today. And I really hope that people stop making the assumption that menopause is just for that certain demographic of women. And there are a lot of younger women that are suffering with it. So let's start at the beginning. Tell me about your journey into menopause.
So I hit medical menopause, first of all, unbeknownst to me, because nobody really told me what was happening. It was just, you'll be on this medication. And I was 33 at that point. To get to there, I'd had 18 surgeries for endometriosis and adenomyosis, and I was at risk of 3 cancers. So I'd got to the point where my body was very tired. It was at very high risk, and I needed to have a hysterectomy. So I was put onto this medication to kind of clear things up, really, in preparation for that hysterectomy. And that was never mentioned as a medical menopause at all. It was called Zoladex. They treat endometriosis with it now. And it's becoming more and more common and widely known that, of course, that is medical menopause. After the hysterectomy, I just turned 34 and whacked right in at surgical menopause. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. Not only the symptoms, but because, again, there was no wraparound conversation around it. And I was just completely lost. I didn't know myself mentally, physically, and completely spiraled and to quite a dark place, really. And then it wasn't until I started to sort of get, the research in and understand more that I thought, okay, I can do something with this. But it was 7 years ago for me now. So I feel like I'm a veteran. And I love it when people say to me, you're too young for menopause, because I do still get that daily on my socials. But I actually do love it, because then I can use it as education and, give them some fierceness right back.
And if you aren't following Victoria's handle, it's Ginge Unhinged, yeah?
Yes.
Go follow it. Even if you're not going through medical menopause or you've not got endometriosis and you don't really, just to see you jumping around in a leopard print onesie is just my favourite thing in the world. So you got thrown in with endometriosis. We talk about endometriosis, we talk about polycystic ovaries, talk about PMS, PMDD, general hormonal imbalance, because it's just not talked about enough, firstly. And second of all, quite a lot of the ladies that use Elle-Sera or that come into contact with our Ask Elle-Sera page are either suffering with it themselves or they've got people within the family that are suffering with it. When it comes to endometriosis, how were you diagnosed? Because I know that that's a big bracket of time for an endometriosis diagnosis. I know this personally. Yeah. But tell me about your diagnosis and how that occurred.
Yeah, so I think the average time for diagnosis now is 7.5 years in the UK. I was 18 when I was diagnosed, which actually is relatively young. They think that I had endo from when my period started. And I may have had these cells beforehand, but I was really, really lucky to be under, quite early on, one of the leading consultants in the country. He was one of the first guys to ever do laparoscopic treatments ever. So I'd had a couple of sort of rounds with NHS scans, the usual things, and I was put onto a medication again quite early on, which was reasonably unknown of at the time. But then when I went to see him, he just took down my symptoms. And before even asking me, before even kind of really going much further into the conversation, he said, "You've definitely got endometriosis." He was so leading in his field, but confirmed by laparoscopy. And that was, quite early on at sort of 18. And then my treatments went from there, really.
So managing that from 18, what are the stages that you've gone through to manage endo? Because like you say, it takes such a long time. You were very fortunate. It does take a long time to get that diagnosis, and the symptoms can be so varying for everybody. How did you manage your symptoms throughout that time frame?
Well, mine it feels like it was a while ago now. This was before social media, before the knowledge really around the women's healthcare conversation had erupted. Very little knowledge with links to gut health, to lifestyle changes, all of those things. I was a teenager, I was still out doing my thing, and not realising how sort of that lifestyle would take a toll on my body. I managed with pain medication, was thrown at me left, right and centre, and continuous abrasive surgery. Mm-hmm. I had ruptured cyst after ruptured cyst. I'm sure you relate. And, it would be in and out of hospital. I was also told to think about having children a lot younger. Yeah. So it was never put across to me as a cure. I know that still is the case now, but it was deemed as my fertility was dropping very quickly. So by 19, it was, if you're going to think about children, you probably need to think about it sooner rather than later, which is a scary conversation to have at 19.
Absolutely.
But that kind of gave me a little bit of break in my cycles when I did manage to fall pregnant, which helped for a couple of years. But of course, then it returned.
How was pregnancy?
Pregnancy for me was tough.
Yeah.
I'd had 2 treatments for cervical, stage 0 cervical cancer when I was 16 and 17, and that had weakened my cervix. There was no formal research at that point to make links while I was pregnant, which is why I then had my daughter 15 weeks early and then consequently had my son early too. So pregnancies were difficult. I would still get endometriosis pain. Of course, my period stopped and the heavy bleeding stopped, but I would still get excruciating back pain, pelvic pain, and they thought that I had pelvic, is it dysplasia they call it?
Yeah.
Yes. But actually I've read a lot more now that actually that potentially could still be endo. So they were tricky because they were early and they came a lot sooner than they had planned.
But it was a nice relief to not have the bleeds throughout. I get that a lot from ladies. I'm always very actively asking people how pregnancy is. I really hope that I can get there.
Yeah.
I have very much like you had the conversations with gynaes, and they were saying to me, I mean, this is like when I was like 17, 18, like, oh, you thought about having kids. And I'm like, well, I wasn't in a relationship to do that at that point in time. I was like, I don't really think that's an idea that you should be putting into people's heads, that like you should fix this by having a baby.
It's not a fix.
It's not a fix. It can improve symptoms. Some people say afterwards, oh yeah, my endo seems to miraculously have gone. thrilled for you.
Yeah.
Other people are like, absolutely not. Came back with a vengeance. It was horrendous afterwards. But yeah, for me, it was Zoladex. Yeah, I've had Zoladex was given to me when I worked overseas because it was a case of like, that'll be a quick fix for a couple of months. So like throw you right into menopause. So again, when people say, oh, you can't relate to my issues, you're like, I'm 33 now, same age as you were when you had your hysterectomy, but you can't relate. You're so young. I'm like, actually, there was a period of time where I worked in the Canary Islands in extreme heat, dancing my little socks off on Zoladex, having hot sweats, having the dryness that comes with it, and it completely turning my world upside down and being like, what the fuck is going on? So I can empathize. And luckily for me, it was reversible because I was on it it was a short period of time. But I started my cycles when I was 8. So my perimenopause is probably going to come very, very early. So I have to be on it like a carb on it. So I've gone contraceptive free. Starting to do that lovely thing that we were talking about, really looking after your gut health, making sure that you're fit and healthy and active and trying not to put any nasties in your body, supplementing with Elle-Sera, things like that, that are benefiting me. So hopefully pregnancy will happen. We'll keep our fingers crossed. Not there yet. Need to put some plaster on the walls first in the process.
Get the house sorted.
But yeah, so I'm thrilled. You very fortunately have 2 beautiful children.
I do, yeah.
And so the conversation of having hysterectomy, I mean, it's never an easy one, surely. I mean, it's a life-changing surgery. Do you feel like it was made easier because you had children or not?
I think to some degree, yes. I'm not sure if I was 100% finished.
Yeah.
And I think the assumption is, and I got that a lot actually, well, you've got 2, so that's okay. And I had to deal with my own loss of fertility in my own way. And I think that's the same for everybody. Yeah. But I have got my 2 and I had to really focus on being well for them. Yeah. I was almost allowing myself to go down a route of, am I fantasizing over another child that I don't even know whether I definitely want, or do I become really healthy, cancer of at least those parts, risk-free and pain-free, hopefully. And that was obviously the option that I took. My uterus was touching my spine, so there probably wasn't much chance of me having a third healthy baby anyway. But yeah, you go through the motions. I think you look at it at all lenses.
And again, hormonally, you'll have been pretty whacked out after that as well. You've gone from it's 0 to 0, and it's other ladies have had preparation of like up to 12 years to really start to acclimatize to menopause. You were just thrown into it. What were the first symptoms that hit you?
And that's such a good point, because going back to what you said at the beginning, where a lot of women say, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, or, you have no clue. And I think actually I do, because there's like 80 odd symptoms and I've probably experienced most of them like at the same time at some point, because there's no let up with surgical menopause and it's lifelong. That's the difference. But to start off with, and this is always me saying this really reflective, because I wasn't in the surgical menopause mindset at the time. I didn't know the term surgical menopause when I came out of my hysterectomy. I just got handed a leaflet how to poo with, really quite old ladies on it. Told not to lift more than a kettle and not to dry for a few weeks. And a box of HRT that was just given to me as a box of medication. That was the conversation. So I always reflect back on it and think, right, what were my first symptoms? Definitely low moods, definitely the mood changes at the beginning, but of course hormones are all, there's still some in your body, they're kind of making their exit. And excruciating night sweats. I remember just thinking, what the hell is going on with my body? Migraines. Yeah. And I started to experience sort of these weird joint pains in my back, in my legs. When I woke up from my surgery, I remember feeling like a switch had gone off and I was like, oh my God, I can feel my legs. Because I hadn't really felt the top of my legs for years. Yeah. Because the endo was so bad. But then slowly these sort of niggles and joint pains came in and I felt like I was creaking out of bed. So those were some of the first ones. And then for me, it was the mental symptoms that really flipped me on my ass.
Yeah. You comfortable talking about those?
Sure.
Yeah. Go on.
So I got very angry. I was extremely difficult to live with. I must have been just awful. Agitated, irritable. I love my family dearly, but I just wanted to escape. Everything made me just so cross, to the point where I thought this could be quite dangerous. And then I started to lose a lot of confidence. I went back to work after, so physically I healed okay, went back to work. And then at work, I just started to lose confidence. And I always describe it as like I couldn't get to everything in the inbox. So I was very like, managing different things, would be the go-to person for all the communications and the kind of creative stuff that I did in my job at the time. But I had no ideas. I was losing memory. I was losing words and placement, and didn't feel that I could sit at the table in a meeting. And that really knocked me, and that triggered then into anxiety. Of course, my stress levels went up because I was worrying about it. And then the low moods got worse, and I was diagnosed eventually after feeling like I didn't want to be here anymore, with depression and anxiety. But I was still, diagnosed mentally ill, not surgical menopause.
Yeah, which is so often the case with natural menopause. Women who, I never like to say this because I don't want to trivialize your experience, but I also want to say that you wouldn't be shocked because you speak to women about it all the time, but other people would be shocked to see my inbox and to see the, people pouring their heart out and saying such similar things to you. I love my partner. I love my children. I love my job. I don't want any of it right now. I don't want to get up. I've got no get up and go in me. I've got no motivation. I just feel like I want to just stay in and lock the world away. And that is not me. And it's this sentence that just gets repetitively said, which is, I just don't feel like me anymore.
Gives me shivers every time I hear it, because I've said it so many times myself. I hear it daily in my inbox, and it's like an epidemic of, women feeling this way and not being able to put their finger on why, and then being misdiagnosed.
And perhaps the other epidemic on the other side of it is this misdiagnosis of, here's some sertraline, that will fix you right up. And I'm often targeted again with this thing of, HRT is the best thing that's ever happened to me, and my antidepressants are brilliant. I'm thrilled, honestly. I don't want to badger anybody that's on them. Like, I know that if they work for you, fabulous. Yeah. But there's also such a wide variety of side effects that come from those medications that can then have implications into other areas of your life that you then think, how do I combat that? So you go in, I don't feel like myself, and a doctor will go, okay, you're depressed. In your case, you absolutely were, and you know that, and you know that was the right stance for you to take. With other women, it is that natural thing of their bodies are just like, what's going on? Yeah. Don't know where I'm at. Everything's gone a little bit hazy and a little bit blurry. I walk into a room and I can't think for the life of me what it is that I'm even here for. Women who are at the peak of their careers are just coming in and going like, I just don't want to talk to anybody. What's going on? And sometimes it's just a case of reaching out to someone like you or I and saying, as a shoulder, this is all the things that I'm feeling. I don't really want to talk to my family about them because they're all going to think I'm crazy. What's going on? And deep-rootedly, it's hormonal health. Yeah. And that's the same thing as, again, with depression and anxiety. It's all intrinsically linked to hormones. But I'm so glad that you got that diagnosis, because there are some people out there that generally, like you're saying, you've got depression. Actually, the root cause of that was that you've gone through menopause. Yeah. And very quickly. Yeah.
And it was my therapist that joined the dots. It wasn't the GP. The GP didn't check my bloods. I'd had blood tests throughout afterwards, but nobody was reading them correctly. So I wasn't absorbing any estrogen at all, which of course is going to affect my cognitive function. Of course it's going to affect the stress levels and everything.
Hot sweats.
Exactly. Yeah. Like the symptoms being off the scale. But it was, my therapist, Dr. Jean, who had this
Is
really...
he as attractive as he sounds?
No, he had this really hot French name.
Yeah.
Dr. Jean was like the shortened version.
Dr. Jean.
And I remember thinking, I mean, I was depressed, but I still remember thinking, God, what if he's hot? And he wasn't. He was near retirement. But that being
But
said,
what a legend Dr. Jean
he
is,
was
by the way.
such a legend because he was the one that really unpicked so much with me. And not only introduced me to a lot of the practices that I still do now, these years on, but he was the one that said, I think this is linked to you being in surgical menopause. And I feel like I say this phrase all the time, but I did sit in that room and was like, wait, what? Like, what even is that? And whether it was because his wife was in perimenopause or had been through menopause, whether he just knew from his background, but it was that moment that was like the light bulb, because then I realized that it wasn't just mental illness. It was, oh, okay, there could be something underlying, and that gave me power.
And what was the next step then?
Research.
Yeah. Love a bit of research.
Yeah. And I'd already set up Ginger Unhinged, which was him again, because he unleashed this sort of trying to get me to find joy. Yeah. And he realized that I was extremely creative. I loved writing. I needed something outside my usual career. And he was like, why don't you go onto social media? I wasn't on social media. Menopause wasn't really talked about at that point. No. My husband thought he was mental, saying, what, you like, that's the worst place you could be. But of course, it's ended up being an amazing community.
It's double-edged sword, social media. I've spoken with guests about it in the past. I think it's fantastic if you're looking for educational resources now. It's the next best platform to speaking to a specialist. But then the problem is everyone thinks that they're a specialist as well. And then on the flip side of it, you've got all of these wonderful content creators like yourself that are creatively putting out, not making fun of it, but making it relatable, making it accessible, and saying, I'm dealing with it. You can too. And that's really what a lot of women do need. So for anybody that's thinking, what is Ginger Unhinged? It's your Instagram handle. Yeah. And you do lots of kind of like TikTok style videos. Some of they're not always like laughy jokey. Some of them are about real serious shit that people need to listen to. Your outlay, as it were, or the way that you kind of like talked about your situation was on social media. And I'm going to say this, it's going to sound like a shameless plug, but it's not. When I speak to ladies and they are going through their Elle-Sera journey, or they're going through a bit of a hormonal wobble, I always say to them, journal. Write those thoughts down. And what's really interesting now is I've just updated my iPhone and they've now got this new journal app that's on there. I wonder if that's because the world is now starting to journal their thoughts a little bit more. We used to be told to like write a diary when we were younger. Then we put it all on social media. So that was like our open diary. That's what my dad calls it, my Irish diary. And you put everything up on there. I don't even need to ask you anything going on anymore. Your stepmom tells me it's all on there. But I say to them, journal, because you can reflect back on this time last month. Were you having a particularly crap day? Is it a cycle? Is it, has it improved? Is it getting worse? Because then they're the sorts of things that you can take to your GP, because when they're having that 5-minute consultation with you and they're rapidly trying to find some form of solution, at least then you've got your own evidence where you can go say, well, that was my last, that was the one that you saw was getting me. When was your last cycle? I don't fucking know. I've been on for like 3 weeks. I don't know that. Whereas if I'd have journaled it, which is what I started to do, you could go in equipped with the right information and they could give you, a more informed decision. So the reason I say journal, and I say it's a shameless plug, you journal.
I do.
And you have also advising other people to journal too. Tell me how.
So journaling is such an interesting one, because I think people get really scared of the term journaling because they think they have to do it every day or there's a certain way to do it. So when I talk about it, it's just really about either putting your thoughts out cathartically when you need to. There doesn't have to be a rhyme and a reason as to how to. I bullet journal every day because that helps my brain fog, my memory. And I also cathartically put stuff down because I like to write it in a creative way. But the key with journaling is finding your own way with it, but it's in that reflection. So whether or not that is taking some stuff down for the doctor or for the meeting that you have, your ideas, your thoughts, or whether it is you're literally writing down the actions that you need to do daily because your brain fog is so thick and you've got all these ideas in your head and all these things you want to do. So you write those down and then you get to the end of the month and you think, well, I didn't do 10 of those. And you're repeating that every month. You can see that cycle in yourself and understand, what is it that's tripping you up? Is it because you don't know how to do the thing? Is it because actually it's not that important to you and you can sack it off? Or is there something else going on? So the key is balancing how you journal, but also the reflection space. And that for me was, and it like life-changing, really. And I know that sounds really dramatic and a little bit wanky, but
love that phrase.
It's so true, because I wouldn't have really got out of the funk of my depression without journaling those key points. And when I talk about key points, I'm talking about get out of bed, brush your teeth, take the dog out for a walk. Those were like my 3 things before I got to take the kids to school. The dog came before the kids, but it was those minute details. And then of course that grew into then creative ideas. And then I take my information with me to the GP if I need to, because we do all get stuck. So I talk about it in an empowering way. And I think these apps are great. There's lots of journals out there. You can tick off every glass of water if that's your thing. It's not my thing, but it's about making it work for you, I think.
But there's also something nice about the physicality of writing it down somewhere, isn't there?
Yeah. Scientific evidence in the action of putting pen to paper and thought through your own energy down into that pen, down into that paper. It is an art as old as we've been on this earth. People were journaling on walls. They were documenting the hunt. They were documenting, the weather on cave walls in hieroglyphics. It's crazy when we think back of how we've used the power of writing to storytell or tell our stories, or to document how we feel about something. And that is so powerful. And it's so underrated.
I also think in the future, I've always said if I was to have children, sounds awful, I would be happy with whatever I was gifted with, but I would really love it to not be a girl, because I would never want them to have to go through what we've had to go through. But equally, if I were blessed and I did have a girl, she could look back on the writings that I have written, and I could look back. I do it. It's very, very close to me, and it's probably the only thing that's not out there in public forum. And I do it for me to speak through with GPs or specialists and things like that. But then part of me also thinks this might be really, really useful one day to a mini-me or someone within my family that's thinking, I think I've got those issues, just so that they can read it and go, I'm not alone. And that again is what feeds back to this social media thing of, I refer people to your page because I go and check out Vic and come back to me. Tell me if you don't feel a little bit better. And they do.
That's because I usually look like a twat in my kitchen.
It's the fluffy hats that do it for me. Everyone needs a fluffy hat and a scarf in their videos.
Apologies for interrupting this podcast, but I need to ask a favour. If you're enjoying this podcast so far, then please hit that subscribe button right now. I'll be straight up and honest that I want to see this podcast grow and flourish into something that I'm really proud of. And the only way that I can do that is with your help. So if you've ever learned anything useful from these conversations, then please return the favour by liking, rating, subscribing, and maybe even sharing it with your friends. Thanks very much. Let's get back to the episode.
But yeah, so you've written a book.
Yes.
And I want to talk about it because you haven't come here to shamelessly plug it.
No.
Bless you, you've come all this way to share your story, and I'm so grateful. And I would like to give some airtime to this because it's no small task.
It's a labour of love, for sure.
And it's brilliant. And you've talked with me about it, but I want you to share what this book is with anybody that's listening today. So tell us about your book.
So the book idea really came from, one, I didn't feel like there was anything that related to me out on the shelves at the time. I started writing this over 2 years ago. And there's some amazing books now. And we're getting so many more menopause books and POI books and books about endometriosis and some books about surgical menopause out there. And the more the merrier. How many pregnancy books do we have? How many books do we have, about cooking bread, for example? I just think, we should have more. But there was nothing really speaking to me in a tone that I felt I could relate to. They were all very medical, which is great. And we all need to know the medical stuff. It's really important. But I was like, okay, when you know the symptoms and you know the medical stuff, then what? And there was this whole personal journaling element that I'd had where I'd started to write things down, obviously what I was experiencing when my HRT was not available or, I couldn't get it because I have to have a specialised type. And I realised that it's not the be all and end all, it's just a piece of the puzzle, really. When I started to explore other ways to help manage my symptoms, I would obviously write about them. And I started to connect to people online and all of these amazing people that are experiencing menopause symptoms in different ways. So I was like, right, I wanted to kind of bring that together to not only help another person just feel less alone, because I felt incredibly alone when I was at my worst, but also to give them something to action, because a lot of the awareness that we've got going on, and awareness is amazing, and there's been so much great stuff. We've got petitions left, right and centre. We've got celebrities talking about it. We've got media. We've got brands now taking on menopause, rightly so. Everybody is amplifying. But there has to be an internal empowerment. And there has to be this point where, as an individual, somebody says, okay, I've gathered the information. Now I've got to make my own rules with it all, because all of our menopause experiences are different. They're all going to be different. So we've kind of got to make our own rules. And that's where I wanted to bring it together. So it was the idea of bringing a little bit about my story, just with the, shizzle of it all and, bit of fun. And the dark part, too. I don't shy away from that in the book. Other people's amazing stories, snippets, words of wisdom of all these different experiences. But the book is really about the reader. It's really about them. And like you just said, journaling out their experience, their reflections on the prompts that I give them, being able to take it into the doctors when they need to, because they have it all there ready, being able to understand what might work for them, what doesn't work for them. And what an amazing gift to hand down to the next generation, to say, this is what I experienced. This, have a read of it. And hopefully you won't feel so alone when you go through it. I wrote it for my children to just kind of close that generational gap.
I wish my mum had it. So my mum had her surgical menopause in her 40s. She won't mind me talking about it. She's very vocal about it. It's our Debs. And hers was based on, Endo, just being completely riddled with it and suffering for years. But I never remember her moaning or having problems. And she was just like, I sucked it up and just carried on. And it just got to a stage in life where she was like, I just can't anymore. And obviously the research had got better. They then realised and the diagnosis was there. And so she had her hysterectomy. And again, very much like you, got catapulted into this kind of whirlwind of menopause. And I really wish that she had something like this, because it was only for her voicing, it was only for her having her hysterectomy that doctors took me seriously. I'd be going in for ages talking about symptoms and problems. And, mum said, I suffered with that as well. But it was because it wasn't ever diagnosed and there was nothing there and didn't seem as being problematic. Just my mum saying she had dodgy periods. Yeah. They didn't really think to look into it. Soon as she had to have a full hysterectomy and they realised the extreme case that she was, they were like, we should maybe give her daughter a look while we're there as well. And that was how I got my first surgery. I had the same gynecologist as my mum. made a really funny joke and was like, do we look the same? And he was like, what? I was like, don't worry about it. It's fine. Sorry, it's the first time I've
They
ever
don't
had
have
to
a
do
great
this.
sense of humour,
Sorry about this.
gynecologists.
No, actually, Mr. Jones, his name was, and I think he's just retired. And so many women, especially in the Northwest region, when we talk about gynae, because now everyone's got a gynae problem.
Yeah.
I used to feel special, and now everyone's got a gynae problem, and they all sing praises of Mr. Jones, and I do too. He was brilliant. He was the person that really started the ball rolling for me, because I think I'd have still been waiting, to be honest. And yeah, so I really wish that Mum would have been able to document it, because she still now really trivializes it. Oh, no, it's fine. Clearly it wasn't. Like, you had to have a full hysterectomy. You got fired straight into menopause. You've been on HRT ever since, and she probably will be until she gets told that she can't anymore. She starts to wean off. She loves Elle-Sera. She swears by it. She's a legitimate golden girl. And she just exudes it. I wish everybody would have a conversation with her to know that you can do both.
Yeah.
This is the other one as well. HRT, you have to have a very specialist form of HRT.
I do, which is because I don't absorb normal estrogen, which is actually more common than we realise in surgical menopause. So I have an implant which is put in every 6 months, which is amazing.
And that's a trek for you to get to, though, isn't it? Where do you have to go for that?
I have to travel nearly 2 hours to get it, because my local NHS trust don't offer it. I get it on NHS, but just, the support, and this is where all the work needs to be done, right? So I have to travel. It's worth it. It has worked for me when other HRTs haven't. However, it is a roller coaster, because I get a lovely little fix when it goes in and everything's like, woo, yay. That's when you see my content going on, because I batch it in, get it in, because I know I'm going to have a drop. So what I have to do is manage my symptoms around that. And I do that through supplements or lifestyle. And that's, when I talk about lifestyle, I don't just talk about the body and the mind stuff. I think we talk about mindfulness a lot nowadays, meditation, of course, going to the gym, lifting the weights, all of the good stuff that we know. But I'm also really interested in energy work and kind of, anything that's going to make me feel good, as well as finding stuff that's going to bring me joy to reduce my stress, because that also triggers a lot of the symptoms that we experience.
When you talk about energy, do you mean things like Raiki?
Yes.
What are your thoughts on Raiki?
I actually love Raiki.
Okay. I'd never had it. We've got a wonderful customer, Danielle, who is a womb Reiki specialist.
Yeah.
And I had a really deep conversation with her, and she was like, you know what? Come try it. Like, whether you're open-minded to it or skeptical, whatever, come and try it. And I'm very much about that. I don't bash anything I've not tried. And the experience was a really profound one. I just thought I'll have a lovely old time relaxing for 45 minutes. She'll put her hands around me and it'll be great. I sobbed for 2.5 days, and it was like therapy. She'd sit there and she'd go, you're so out there and you're open to everybody, but you're like a little clam. And I was like, oh, I'm like a clam. She's like, no, there's so much there that you won't let go, because you don't want it to impact or hurt anybody else. I was like, how did you know that from my energy? So I'm still not completely sold on it. I'm a reflexology girl. I do love reflexology. That really, really does lessen my my symptoms. But what Reiki do you have, and what effect does it have on you?
So I love Reiki. I have it combined with sound healing.
Okay.
So I see an amazing lady local to me. I know a couple of different sound healers, actually. My dear friend Diane, who actually I write about my first experience with her sound healing in my book, because that was extremely profound. And then now she lives far away, so I can't see her, but I see another lovely lady, and she does whatever your energy needs. So sometimes it's a bit of Reiki, sometimes it's a bit of reflexology, sound with crystal bowls, oils, crystals, whatever kind of, I suppose, takes her fancy at the time and you need. The thing with it is you are unconsciously learning to let stuff go, or your body's releasing it. When sometimes we consciously try to hold it on. So talking therapy is not for everybody. And as much as we want to offload through talking therapy, I love talking therapy. Can you tell why? I literally was like, poor Dr. Jean was just like, what the hell? But there's also that internal stuff that we don't let go of. So to be able to relax and let that energy be released in whatever way it does, through frequencies, is incredible. And it's the same as being brought together when people sort of a bit like, oh, I don't really get all that woo-woo stuff. And I always say, think about when you go to a concert or a gig and it's amazing and you're all singing the same song to the same band that you love, and there is something in the air, gives me goosebumps. Like you just know it, right? It's like a common prayer across the stadium, or it feels magic. And that's energy. That's a frequency of us being aligned. So it's just about kind of knocking those things back into, I don't know all the science behind it. I just know it works for me. I love it. Makes me feel super good. I also cry a lot after.
Yeah, it was so weird though. I'm really not a crier. I'm really logical.
I don't,
these things don't affect me. And I messaged her and I was like, I sobbed my left leg off for 2 whole days. My boyfriend must have thought, what is going on? But we had some really deep and meaningful conversations after it. And I was like, this is how I'm feeling. Can we talk about this? And he was very good. I don't know what it did for my womb, whether or not it has done anything, whatever, but I felt lighter. I felt, you're so right. There was definitely something that was shedded. And I also feel when I in particular speak to women at Elle-Sera, sometimes I say to people, do you know what? Go and try things, whether or not you get told they're a bit woo-woo or that's a load of shite, that's not going to work for you. If it works for you, do it.
Yeah.
There are people out there that are so borderline desperate for something to help them that if, going and seeing someone and them waving some crystals around you gives you what you need, you go do that. Don't be affected by what anybody else thinks or says. And it feeds back to this thing of, social media, you talk about things and then you've got the keyboard warriors that'll tell you everything's wrong and these are all of the things that's right. Everyone's entitled to opinion. You've seen the responses that I give to people. I never bite back. I don't want to bite back. I love that people engage on those posts. I love that they disagree so much that I'm using a woman that's under the age of 40 to represent menopause, that they have to tell me that I'm wrong. Because that's why Alyssa has created this product. It's why she has created it to look the way that it looks, to feel the way that it feels, and to do what it does. Because all women should have the opportunity to be hormonally balanced, regardless of what their age is. They shouldn't feel judged for having brain fog or vaginal dryness in their 20s, because we're human. These things happen. Don't feel shamed that you can't talk about it because, we always used to say, it's always a Sandra or a Barbara, isn't it? So a Sandra or Barbara that likes to say, well,
Mine's a Doreen. But...
Doreen, that's it. Sandra, I feel bad because there's some lovely Sandras and Doreens and Barbaras out there.
I couldn't use Karen. That was too overused.
No, Karen's just over. Yeah. I know some lovely Karens.
So do I.
And I'm like, God, can we not change your name by default? You're not a Karen.
I went for Doreen.
But I love it. I love engaging with it. And I think you do as well. You find
I love it. I'm like, oh yeah, that gives me some more content.
Yeah.
But it is, I find humour in it to then kind of throw back with educational humour. I like to think that somebody asked me what is it that you do other than, now I can say, well, I'm an author. And I like to say, actually, I think I'm a comical educator is maybe a term to use, because I'm not as straight-laced as going, oh, okay, and now I'm going to give you all the scientific facts here. But it's about giving back to somebody and educating them, but making it in a humorous way so that it's not, it's not kind of hitting back with, you're wrong. And, it's because they don't know what they don't know.
Absolutely. And that's the whole point. Have those engagements. Tell people that you think that they're wrong, for them to come back to you and express why they feel that they're right. The world would be such a boring place if we all had our views aligned. We're constantly badgered for thinking that we're anti-HRT. We are so not. There's a blog all about it on our website. Elle-Sera is taken in conjunction with HRT by many, many women because they can take both. And they take both because HRT fixes, X amount of problems on the list, and then Elle-Sera does the rest.
Which is what
and
I do.
It's finding that balance like you have found. It doesn't have to be one or the other. You can have them both harmoniously.
But lots of women cannot take HRT, or they don't. They're not so in touch with the research, or the doctor's not so in touch with the research to say, actually, yes, you can take HRT and you can take this form over that form. So there has to be these other choices. And this is what it's about. It's about making your own rules, whether that is, you know, balancing a crystal on your chakras, or whether that is taking Elle-Sera, or, you know, just taking HRT, whatever your choice. It's about finding what works for you at the point in time, because our bodies will change the whole time. So we've got to be on top of the journaling, really, to notice those changes, to see whether do we need to change doses? Do we need to try something new? You know, how do we bring in more joy? How do we, you know, continue to evolve? And I always say, you know, once you get your physical body set, the mental side sorted, you know, we're in such a better position then to step back into the empowerment, to step back into what our soul needs and what lights us up. And that's why a lot of menopausal women, whatever age, suddenly realize, oh, okay, I'm ready. I've got this fire in my belly, and I can go and do the things that I want to do. And whether it's, you know, leave a marriage or change a career or decide they're not going to put up with all the rubbish that they've put up with, or whether it's to write a book or to go and audition for a musical, like whatever it is, you know, it's just finding something that lights your soul up. But we're not in that position until we get the other things sorted. And that's about bringing our pieces of jigsaw together.
Absolutely. So in addition to journaling and using your wonderful book as a tool, what's the name of your book?
It's called My Menopause, My Journal, My Rules
by
Victoria Hardy.
You nearly told
Written
someone,
and illustrated.
You nearly told someone that on the train as well, didn't you?
I did. Yeah.
Was she having a little chat to herself about her hormones?
Yeah, and then I was just going to be like, oh, might have a book for you there that you want to read. Yeah, it was quite interesting. Came in, but very hush hush conversation. Whereas when I'm talking about it on the train, I make sure I at least get in a vulva and, you know, vagina into the conversation quite loudly for everyone to hear those words.
You should realise that the two are separate. We had a whole conversation. Poor Calvin had to listen to us saying the word vulva like 47 times on a podcast with Katie Cotton. And we had Gillian Anderson had a dress recently, and they're like, oh, it's a vagina dress. I was like, it's a vulva dress.
It's a vulva dress.
Thank you.
Yes.
No, we've become very vocal about it. Alyssa's always been really loud and proud and able to say things. I really struggled when I first started with Elle-Sera. I was very much like, I can't say those words. Wow, that's a bit much. And now the more I throw myself into the brand and I, you know, become at one with all of our incredible customers, the more I want to say those words and hope that, you know, they'll follow as well. So yeah, love a few buzzwords. So your book is there. It's fantastic. You very nearly told someone on the train about it. I'm going to set you a challenge. You need to tell someone in Liverpool about it. So just stop them on the street and go, this is my book.
Yes, I'll say, this is my book. Have a read. Yeah, I did talk to a lady on the train and she took a photo and she's gonna buy it. But the lady behind me was muttering away a conversation, and I wanted to kind of just lean over the seat and go, I think this might help you. And actually, if I'd have had more than one copy with me, I probably would have just given her a copy and said, here, I have that on me, because she, you know, was having this conversation.
That little bit of niceness. So you talked about your symptoms. You've talked about how journaling really aids them. What if I was to ask you the question of, tell me the top 3 things that you do to improve your lifestyle post-surgical menopause? What are they?
Okay, top 3 things. I'm going to start with the mental side of things. Something that I do, obviously apart from journaling, is practicing mindfulness, and I do meditate. I don't sit in a quiet room cross-legged. I can't sit cross-legged anymore because my joint. But I do consciously practice mindfulness, and it is constant practicing. So that's just about being present in the moment and practicing it on the days that I feel good, which is a lot harder than doing it when we already feel like we're losing our shizzle, right? So is taking the moment with my morning coffee, for example, and really taking that time to notice everything. So I do that, and that has really helped to bring my stress levels down, and that's massively impacted my anxiety, because anxiety is so huge in terms of symptoms, and that has made a big impact on my anxiety. Sorry, I forgot what I said then. There's the brain fog in real time for you. Thank you very much, brain fog. What else have I done? I'd like to say that I hit the gym 7 days a week.
Gym's
but
cafe
I think we can tell that I
mentality.
don't. I do enjoy movement. I talk about movement a lot. I know that lifting weights is really important. And I have done that a lot more post-surgery than I did ever before. I think that's definitely been a great addition. But just finding movement in whatever joyous way. So for me, it's dancing in my kitchen, walking down the beach, taking my dog out, making sure that I get that in every day. Because it's really easy to sit on our phones, to sit and not move our bodies. And what would be the third thing? I feel stumped.
What sort of foods do you eat? Because I feel like you're very vocal about talking about like what you put in is also really important.
Yeah.
And there are certain foods that you know categorically ruin your
like
good
sugar.
spell. Yeah, sugar.
And chocolate digestives.
There you go.
Espresso martinis.
There you go. So they're the things that you shouldn't
I
be
don't
consuming
have
in
any
your
of those, by the way.
You
ever.
do.
No,
It's fine to have those, but
I do. And I say in my book and I say on my socials all the time, I do not pretend to be a nutritionist. I'm closer to touring with Beyonce than ever doing that. And I am addicted to chocolate digestives. But here's the but. I have learnt to manage sugar symptoms a lot better. It's never been about completely cutting out for me. I'm just not that type of person. This is my rules now. But what I did do was I took some time to do a big gut reset to learn what my body reacts to and what doesn't, what it's okay with. And what I found from that was that there were certain things that would raise things like histamine levels. So we talk a lot about allergies with perimenopause and menopause and why my hay fever suddenly worse, or why have I got itchy skin, itchy eyes, dry eyes. A lot of it is connected to histamine because they have the same receptors in your body as estrogen. So I worked out alcohol has a lot of histamine. So changing those type of things, not choosing certain types of alcohol. I don't drink a lot anyway. I'm not a huge drinker, apart from tequila on a big night out, but that's very few and far between. But I will just change that. So I don't really drink wine anymore. I don't really drink those high histamine alcohols. And again, the same with certain food triggers. So doing that gut reset and learning what my body reacted to was really quite powerful because I learned that, if I have too much cheese, that's all the good stuff in it, too much coffee, and I can take a supplement beforehand if I know it's Christmas, I'm going to do cheese and wine. But yeah, it's making the tweaks, I would say, rather than cutting anything out for me. Having your electrolytes in the morning, reducing your caffeine is a big one. Yeah. Alcohol. I've babbled. But that is me babbling around.
It's not babbling around.
The conversation
it's
of
real.
food.
It's reality. A lot of people, we speak to nutritionists, we speak to, experts in the field that will say, you need to eat this amount. The podcast that we had last week was the exact same thing. It was, you should eat this in this amount and you shouldn't excel this and you shouldn't do that. There's always this word of shouldn't.
Yeah,
and
should.
Yeah. And
whereas I always say, sack off the shoulds, coulds and woulds. Just do the you in the moment, but do the best that you can in the moment. And I talk about being fierce a lot online and people think that that's like, you're the best version of yourself and all that. That's utter rubbish. Like, we just cannot be the best versions of ourselves all the time.
No.
We've got to learn to be fierce, find our rules in the mess, in the daily life. And if I had a chef come and cook for me, could I be sugar-free? Possibly. I'm living my life with 2 teenage kids who both eat different things. I've got one husband at home that doesn't eat meat. I'm cooking 4 different dinners for 4 different people. Yeah. Without all of the other stresses of work life. So what I always say is just take the micro moments, rather than going, and especially, dare I say this time of year where everyone's like, super health kick. Take the micro moments and just say, today I made good choices or better choices than I did yesterday where I devoured a packet of chocolate digestives. I chose the chicken sandwich over, the croissant, whatever.
Yeah.
But it's about taking the micro moments rather than,
And it's about finding whatever's right for you.
Yeah. And
some
joy.
people can go really, really overkill with nutrition and it works really well.
And I've done that in the past.
Fine.
I did it with my Endo. I did it to an unhealthy level to try and manage my endo with food and exercise. And I, on the outside, maybe to some people looked amazing, had a 6-pack, ran 4 10Ks a week, was doing HIIT every day for an hour. You know, I was a machine. But up here in my head, I was crumbling.
Yeah.
And my body was in excruciating pain, and it became an obsession to manage pain with those type of things. So I think that's why for me, I'm very careful around my relationship with food. And, you know, I turned 40 last year, and it's the first time in a long time that I feel okay. I feel okay in my body. I feel healthy in my body. It wobbles, it shakes. My boobs are gigantic because they're hormonally like, what is going on? But, you know, we're okay with that. So sometimes I eat the salad, sometimes I eat the biscuits.
Choose life in the words of
Choose
Mum.
life. Don't put this next to one of your nutritionist podcasts. I'm
Shit.
just saying. You just get nothing but realness from me.
That's all right. Victoria, I've loved every minute. Thank you so much. It's been like having a chat with an old school friend. Thank you so much, and have a great journey back.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.